10:01, according to the clocks on my monitors. And so that means it's time for whatever this turns out to be with Dyson Dungeons. I'm planning to do some touch-up to tape some parts, preparing them for spray painting, and to test the fit of some suspension bits. And I'm probably also going to try to start painting the instrument panel. Since I'll be using one of the same colors that I'm using for the touch-up, I'll probably try to do that at the same time. These are the bits that I'm working on. And the touching up is necessary because at the end of the stream on Monday, I tried to highlight some details with some flat black paint, and it just got really messy. And now I need to try to fix it. So that's what I'm going to do. So the touching up involves little bits around here and here. Okay, it's not too terribly bad. We'll see how this goes. And then lots of bits around here where I attempted to paint the brake lines and pretty much just made a black smudge of everything. So I'm going to do those things first. These bits are done, not that. These bits here, and then this is the instrument panel that I will be attempting to work on. There. I am exceptionally. There's been, hi, Who? You came on right away for a flip at the beginning. This hasn't happened in months and months. It caught me off guard. Well, in celebration of that, I'll flip a large thing. I'll flip a sear. Why not? Maybe I should close this box so that in case it flips over there, it doesn't mess anything up. So let's see how this flip works. One sear, one not sear, 2-to-1 sear, 2-to-2. It's a tie. 3. So is it going to be 4-to-2, or is it going to be random 3-to-3? It is. It turned out to be just what probability it would predict. 3 of each, assuming that was a fair and unbiased flip. So thanks for joining in and reminding me it's time to flip the audience off. Yeah, so I'm going to touch up these bits that I painted black to try to make them look okay, because they're kind of ragged right now. I'll be using some aluminum paint to do that, and the same is true of this other thing, which I put somewhere here, which needs touching up. The thing is that the aluminum paint is kind of translucent, right? So in order to I'm going to try to scrape off some of the black paint where it's not supposed to be, and then put the aluminum paint over that. So if I scrape that off, it'll be lighter, and hopefully it won't show flaws. Oh, I put my I recharged this over the last day, so I need to go over there and get it, the lenses. It's a very warm day here yesterday, and then a cold front has come through. I mean, relatively speaking, cold in that the temperature is dropping more than 20 degrees. And I think there's been a significant change in air pressure as well. and there's scientific debate. Nobody knows if this is true or not. I will say it is. When the air pressure changes, it can cause achiness. And I think that's what's happening to me is I've got achiness going on. And somehow I was able to get spill coffee onto this. The coffee is leaping like my paint does. Really. I did spill some on the way down here to the workshop, which means that so far today I've only spilled one thing. I came close to spilling a second thing, but it didn't happen. So maybe you all get to see it. I don't know. Take a look at how this is. I'm going to use this little pin. Sure, I even need to touch that up. The dogs woke up. Some of that black paint is coming off so nice and cleanly. I might not even need to put aluminum paint touch up on it. Going silent already. It's just going to be that kind of day, isn't it? Sure what these little bits are supposed to be. But in the pictures of the real thing, they are they're black. So I painted them black. Yeah. I mean, the amount of touching up here is going to be pretty minimal, actually. Let's see how this works on the brake lines. It didn't work. That just scraped everything off, exposing the chrome plating underneath. Excuse me. That just went very poorly. So what's on here is a tiny little raised line that represents the brake line of the car. And I tried to paint it black so that you could see that there was a brake line there. And the black paint just, I don't know, it was uncontrolled. And it just went everywhere. So the result is just kind of a mess more than anything else. This part, black paint, is not even on the raised part. It's only on the part below it. This is one so badly that I think I'm gonna scrape all the black paint off and just repaint it aluminum and hope that it turns out okay. Because it's just really not good. Just, yeah, just a failure. This might be one of these things where I just end up having to reprime the whole thing if the aluminum paint doesn't cover well. It was worth a try, but it just did not, it failed. I might try again with the ballpoint pen. I mean, what can happen? Just go back and forth and put layer and layer of paint on this, I guess. I had highlighted a couple of little bits with darker paint, dark aluminum. But I can always do that again. This just looks messy now. Take that off with paper towel and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. Should I just not even bother trying to talk today? I wonder if that's what I should do. If I can't even say isopropyl alcohol. Instead of sighs, I'm going to groan. What we're going to live with is groaning. Okay, well, this was a 50-50 success. The touch-up on the body of the car went okay. This is not going okay. So I'm removing the black paint, or most of it anyway. I'm going to repaint it with the aluminum color that it was before. Then repaint it. No, here's a thought. It's shiny. I don't think it's definitely not authentic, but it's almost tempting to do that. If you can see it, like the brake lines here, the chrome is showing through and it's just shiny. Maybe one option would be to just paint this and then scrape the paint off the high point and have it be shiny. But the brake lines were not shiny, so that would be kind of a bad idea, really. So if I know it's going to be a bad idea, I probably won't do it. Okay, well, I think I've gotten this kind of back to where it was before I messed it up with the effort to paint the brake lines. Let dry for a bit before I attempt to paint it. So what I will be doing with the aluminum paint is repainting the parts here where I took the paint off. Just paint the whole thing just to keep it kind of uniform. Because I got alcohol in there and it upset the finish anyway. Need to touch up just a little bit around some of these guys, especially here on this side where I actually missed a spot when I painted it. This is the instrument panel back. I don't need to paint the back because it's already painted. The back is black. I need to turn it over, so I'll put the stick back in this way. You can see the little dials on there, right? You can see the dials, there's the raised ridges around them. I'm going to paint those aluminum so that they're shiny. And then the inside is painted flat black like that. And there's little raised bits that are supposed to be like dials and things. And those I can try to paint white. And then there's some little bits of switches and things on here that will probably be black, and maybe, since the instrument panel is red, it'll probably just be black. Yeah, the part around the dials, all of that is painted red. I have some pictures of the instrument panel. I wonder if any of the pictures are helpful. This is a ancient Polaroid I took of the real car. And you can see it's red, and then with aluminum round with the black dial on the inside. It's helpful as I was hoping. And it's getting close to being dry. I need my head magnifiers for this and not for this. I'm going to do the tiny bits of touching up first. See if I can be successful at that. You never know how it will go. So I had been talking about, races in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s. Not only was there, kind of a lack of safety for the drivers, as I was saying, in the late 50s, they didn't even have no much fire suits. They'd drive in a t-shirt because the weather was hot. That's how they stayed cool during the race. They had a helmet with goggles, not a big faceplate thing. There wasn't any air conditioning in their suits or in their helmets or anything like that. There wasn't even any side support for their heads. So as they were going around the turns, I guess they built up just massive neck muscles, but only in one direction, because their head was always being pushed over to the right because they were turning left, and all the forces would push things over to the right. I'm just looking startled because I didn't spatter paint on myself this time. I'm not even sure if the cars really had push steering or anything like that. They might not have. I need to get some paint in here. because it wasn't painted originally. Despite putting 3 coats of paint on, they managed to miss that. Yeah, there should be music playing. Ages and ages ago, there used to be music playing. I was told it was going to come back, but it never did. And it would have been good because then when I stopped talking like that, because of doing something and not being able to do 2 things at once, that kind of stuff. Be a good thing to have, but we don't have it. So then you just heard the sound of silence there. I didn't talk. I'm spreading a little bit of paint around here. That's going to be okay. Good enough. Now let's see what I can do with this. Painting the top, these edges of these dials first, because it's likely that some of this paint is going to get, it's going to get on the inside and the outside. And I will paint up to it by putting black paint on the center and on the outside. What's going on here? The paint isn't getting on the brush. Or if it is, it's not coming off. This is my one of my favorite brushes here. I guess I'm going to have to do it like this in order to get the paint. I just need to get it everywhere, even where I don't want it. Yeah, it's like I'm trying to paint detail, but pretty much just slathering paint everywhere. not awful, but it's not what I was hoping for. So I was starting to say, but then stopped saying it because I decided I couldn't talk and paint at the same time. So it seems, is that not only was it dangerous drivers, it was also quite dangerous for the spectators. And the pit crews. So the cars would come in, to get fuel and tires. And now if you watch a race, there's a pit lane behind a wall. A big wall separates it from the track. Okay. But back in the day, that wasn't the case. The pits were actually just on the side of the track. There was a wall. Okay. There was a pit wall, but the cars would come in on the track side of the wall. The wall just separated the crews, the mechanics and tire changers and fuelers and things. It separated them from the track. But the cars would actually stop pretty much just on the track. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's how it was. Is they would be just over to the side. It's like pulling off the side of a highway or something, except in this case, there were cars zipping by at 130 miles an hour, trying to pass each other and do other things like that. So it did on occasion happen that a car could be stopped, on the pit lane, which was on the track, and there would be an accident in which that car would be hit by a car that was on the track, that was racing. It was, trying to remember, it probably wasn't until maybe the early to mid 60s that routinely, regularly, the pit lane would have walls on both sides, one separating it from the inside and the crews on the inside, and the other one separating it from the track. They also did things back then that, just don't happen now. I know there was one 500-mile race, at least one. I think that was, I can't remember when exactly, 50s, 60s, somewhere in there, where the tire manufacturer, usually it was Firestone at that time, the tire manufacturer decided that pit stops were, if you stopped for tires and fuel, you weren't racing. So if you didn't have to stop for tires and fuel, then you could keep racing and not have to take time away and let other people maybe get ahead. So they came out and said, we have a tire that will last 500 miles. Now, in order to do that, the rubber compound had to be pretty hard, and it didn't have that much grip, so the cars would slide around a little bit. But they actually did that now. Tires are really soft rubber and they hardly last. It's unusual for them to last even 100 miles before they're almost completely worn out. That's not terrible. Let's see how that turns out when I get the black paint on the inside. The other thing they did, and this turned out to be an incredibly dumb idea, it actually cost two people their lives. Two people were killed because of this. Not as the immediate cause. This wasn't the thing that just killed people, but it led to their deaths. Is the I think I should have looked it up. It was either 67 or 68. Is that there was not only a tire that would last 500 miles. They said, well, what if we didn't even have to stop for fuel? What if we had enough fuel in the car to last 500 miles? Now, this wasn't the tremendous, when you think about that, you think about cars nowadays, and some of them will actually, in 20 gallons of gas almost get that far. But the fuel mileage was, was like 4 miles to the gallon. So in order to do that, a car had to carry maybe 120 gallons of gas, which is a lot of gasoline. And the thing is, too, that they were driving the rear-engine cars with Chevy and Ford engines, that kind of thing. This paint doesn't stick to the chrome. And so cars were carrying an immense amount of gasoline. And on the first lap of this race, when the cars were still really close together, one of the cars lost control and slammed into another car. That slammed into another car, and there was this gigantic gasoline fireball. Fire burned for. It felt like forever. And I'll explain why it felt that way, because there was another innovation that happened then in terms of watching the races. Yeah, and 2 drivers were killed in the fire, and several others injured. That eventually led to some significant changes in, the racing. One was maybe you shouldn't be carrying 120 gallons of gasoline, which makes the car kind of heavy and maybe a little hard to control, that kind of thing. The other is that there were improvements in the fuel container, the fuel tank. Using some of the technology that was used in airplanes, warplanes, self-sealing fuel tanks. So the fuel tanks themselves now started having like rubber bladders that wouldn't burst open and would keep the fuel from sloshing around, so that it would throw your car out of balance, that kind of thing. And also, I'm going to have to put another coat of this on because the chrome plating, I need cover it. Yep, try to do something and it goes badly. That one went, this bit went badly. It was really, I mean, this is a huge combination of things. One is that with the rear engine cars starting, um, the designs of the cars just suddenly had to change, and just a lot of experimental, bizarre kinds of designs happened as people experimented with different engines and different locations and different configurations of the car. The car that actually caused the accident, the one that went out of control, the driver of that car was one of the ones who was killed in the accident. I mean, there was a warning out that the car itself was unstable, that it couldn't be safely driven, and several of the drivers were just petitioning the officials to not let that car drive. But it's like, well, it's not against the rules. It ended up being a disaster. Sometimes you just really, people making those decisions really should be paying attention to the people who know what's going on, like the drivers of other cars or engineers, that kind of thing. It was really a horrible accident. One of the worst ones in some time. The I actually saw it happen, because as I was talking about it earlier, the races were not televised. They weren't on what was then broadcast TV. There wasn't any such thing as cable or streaming. It was, whatever you got on the three main channels, maybe PBS and a fourth one would be available. I think, they didn't do that, but what they did do was that they had what's called a simulcast. I guess you call it that still. Is that they would have some cameras at the racetrack, and then they would send that signal, to like arenas that would then sell tickets, and they would show it up on a big screen. It would be a giant projection screen. Basically, it was like a movie. They would use the equivalent of a movie projector. It was black and white. They couldn't do it in color. There were maybe 3 or 4 cameras at the track altogether, so the coverage wasn't great, but it was possible then to kind of watch the race by going to an arena where they were projecting this it was very low resolution, as you can imagine, onto a giant screen. And yeah, my dad and I and my brother were there, and this was either the first or second time they had done that kind of simulcast, and so you got to see this. And then we waited forever for the fire to burn out and to be cleaned up, and it was really something. I think people, unless you were there at the time, it's kind of hard to describe the primitive nature of things like watching a race, and what a exciting innovation it was to be able to go to an arena and watch it, shown up on a screen like a movie happening almost in real time. But it was very unfortunate that was our experience. We got to see a racing disaster. Well, I was saying that it wasn't always safe for the spectators either. I mean, not just the pit crews, because they were out on the track in some cases. But if you were to watch newsreels, what would have been old films, which you can still see sometimes, they'll have them available. You can see them online or from archives, that kind of thing, is that sometimes, especially like with Formula One and some of the road racing, people were just sitting on a hill and there would be nothing between them and the race cars. Okay? Just nothing. So if a car went out of control, it did. This actually happened a couple of times. It would just plow into the crowd, and many, many people were killed and injured that way. So what we see is racing now is really very different than what it was at the time. Yeah, the fencing now, the catch fences are way stronger. Even the walls, the concrete walls that didn't always exist and then are put into place, even those have changed in the last 7 or 8 years. They call it a safer barrier now, where there's not just a concrete wall, which is pretty unforgiving when you hit it. But the idea is to absorb as much of the energy of a crash as possible, not on the driver. Okay, to have anything other than the driver absorb the energy of a crash. And so what they have now is they have a wall, and then they have these styrofoam, pretty much this plastic foam kind of thing, maybe 18 inches long, and then another wall on the outside, so that if somebody hits the wall on the outside, it absorbs. It's like a big shock absorber. And you can actually see that happen. If the camera's in the right place, you'll see that the wall pushes up against the other wall and absorbs the impact. Well, let that dry and then put another coat on it. This is a thing that's going to get taped, so I'll just leave this out. And the next step for this is to paint the insides of those dials black, the same flat black as the back, and not get it on those little rings. But yeah, just massive changes in safety requirements, and they continue to this right up until the last several years, where there was some major changes. It used to be that accidents are really quite rare when racing was so much more dangerous, especially in open wheel racing. Just didn't touch each other. It was a bad idea because there was no energy dissipation in those cars, and the restraints were really quite bad. And the driver was extremely vulnerable. So as I understand it, the physics of a crash, not that you really want to have one, but what happens is, there's a lot of energy. There's this mass of car moving along at a certain velocity, okay? And if it crashes, all of that energy has to go somewhere because it's not moving anymore. And if nothing crumples, it just stays in the vehicle and the driver feels the full force of it. And so a lot of what this two aspects of safety. One is to have as much of that energy go somewhere outside of the car as possible. Okay. And the other is to keep the driver as absolutely stationary as possible so you don't have these secondary impacts or wrenching. Drivers would, as speeds increased, a major source of injury and even death was a neck injury because of just the huge whiplash of your head moving. The car stops, but your head keeps moving, and just boom, neck would break. That was pretty bad. So, two things. One is that cars are intentionally made now to kind of fly apart, especially open wheel cars. And if there's a crash, there's a lot of mass in the wheels and the tires and the suspension, especially the wheels and the tires. Those break off and go flying. Not that you want to be, hit by a flying wheel with a tire on it, but that takes the energy of the impact away from the car, the body of the car where the driver is sitting, and that reduces the energy that could be transferred to the driver because it's flying off somewhere. So when you see all these parts flying, sometimes even like the engine will be torn off, and not just the wheels and the suspension. Certainly the wings and things will go. And it looks pretty dramatic, but in fact, it is safer for at least the driver than if that didn't happen. Kind of counterintuitive that way. So in accidents, sometimes that looks really horrendous because parts are flying all over the place. From the driver's perspective, is less horrendous than if that didn't happen. So so cars now, there's like foam pods around them to absorb the impact, walls that absorb the impact, car parts that take the energy away, that kind of thing, all in an effort to reduce the amount of energy that can be transferred to the driver. The other thing then is, since some energy is transferred to the driver, is to have, to minimize the secondary collisions. And so there are, not just a lap belt, but 5-point safety harnesses that go around to keep the shoulders and everything, and head and neck restraint devices that protect you from moving side to side, but also forward. So the idea is to keep the driver immobile inside of a protective cage or tub that in which there can be no intrusion. So you got very, cars that fly apart except for the part where the driver is, which is built very strong so that it doesn't even dent. And that has, made a big difference in terms of driver safety. Not necessarily a beneficial impact on racing itself, because if you feel safer, if one is feeling safer, one can also can be less careful. And that actually is the case, I think. No, I don't think it's a good idea to make cars less safe so that drivers are more careful. Would definitely not say that. I think we should just be aware of that the increased safety to the driver does mean that maybe the drivers are less cautious than they probably could be otherwise. And a crashed car cannot win a race. You know, sometimes you just wonder now if you're taking a chance on the track, if that's it doesn't pay off very well if the result of that is that your car is not out of the race and so are you. I'm putting another coat on this because the chrome bits are still showing through. My failed effort to paint the brake lines just it's resulted in just having to redo the whole thing, at least on the top like this. I have to decide whether I'm going to try again or not. I'm going to have it be not sneaky. Kind of failing at that. Okay, that's about as good as it'll get for now. But it's one of the things is that I'll just talk about the open wheel racers for now, not the stock cars that were based on actual cars. And open wheel racers, they did not absorb any of the impact. If they hit each other or hit the wall, no parts fell off. You didn't even get much of a dent or anything. It's the driver that was sitting mostly exposed up in the cockpit really could get hurt. There was, it was just an incredibly dangerous sport. Yeah, I need to wait for that to dry because that is one of the parts I need to test fit. Suspension, and then at some point today I do need to tape this because I can't really get much further along with this until the outside is painted. I think the next bit I should do, though, is I should try to paint the insides of these dials black. I will say try because I don't know how that will go. Making a mess of it. Mm-hmm. The other thing about racing is that back in the late 50s and 60s and before that, when they talked about a stock car race, you wonder why do they say stock car nowadays, right? Is because what they meant by that It is. It's all wet outside. It got cold after the sunny day we had yesterday. It's supposed to rain all day out here, which is fine because, plants and things like that, but it is kind of gray and not inviting to be outside. Okay, I need to put the head magnifiers back on again. Last time I squeezed this paint out, the bottle top, the nozzle was plugged a little bit, and I squeezed out like half a bottle of it. But back in the day, they really were stock cars. That is, they came from the stock dealership. And the number of modifications you could make to it, there were some that were necessary, that were required. For example, you had to have a roll cage inside of your car. But then there are things that were allowed, like changes to the suspension. Those are fairly strict. And even then, you could make changes to the suspension, but you had to use parts that were kind of readily available. Uh, you know, everything just being machined and custom made time. I have to go silent again, I think. Attempting to do is push the paint from the center to, but not over, metal painted rim dial. This is going to be excruciating, I think. Part of it is that paint actually dries quickly. Okay, well, there's one that's not too bad. Sorry about the sniffling. The change in the weather brought sniffles. I have to stop and blow my nose. stop and focus my eyes. I think it's just an asymmetry in the bezel here. Just it's not perfectly symmetric in the circle. But the toothpick I'm holding is not a round toothpick. As I rotated it, no, let's just say that it leapt. It didn't rotate at a constant speed. Jumped. Sorry, I really do. I've got drainage in my nose here. Sorry about that. But it had to be done. So if you're looking at this, which is mostly on camera, yeah, camera guy, you would think, given used to with most vehicles. But this big one in the middle would be like a speedometer. Race cars do not have speedometers. Okay, because it isn't when you want to go as fast as you can, but there isn't any, there's no reason for the driver to know exactly what the speed is. What is most important, and that's what the largest dial in the cockpit will be the tachometer. How fast is your engine turning? It's really important because if it goes too fast, it will blow up. I mean, it just will. The parts won't be able to handle it and they'll blow up. So the biggest dial is going to be the tachometer. There isn't really even a fuel gauge that tells them how much fuel there is. There is a fuel pressure gauge, which tells them whether the fuel is efficiently flowing to the engine or not. And if you lose fuel pressure, well, then the fuel isn't going into the engine and it's not going to run. You're also concerned about your oil temperature and oil pressure. That will tell you also whether or not your car is going to blow up. Oil pressure is important. Pressure, see, there's little bits here and here. Tiny little spots where I need to do aluminum touch-up. I'm not going to do the aluminum touch-up until after I paint the red on the outside, though, because when I put the red on, I very well may end up, getting the red on the aluminum as well, in which case, touch that up too. I'd say that came out, with a little spot there. Dial's not quite right here. To try to fix that. Yeah, that's better. That's that. Excuse me. Um, it came out mostly okay. I think. No, I need to let that dry, and then I need to put the red paint on and see how that's going to end up looking. Hopefully, it will look okay. What are we getting to? Almost 11:30. I usually do not take a break, but today I'm going to take probably a 15-minute break in just a little while, right around 11:30ish or so. Thanks for bearing with me as I kind of went silent there. Yeah, I'm going to do the dark aluminium cut detailing like I did before, but I'm giving up on the brake lines. It's just not going to work. I think it was worth the effort to try to make them look good, but it's just not going to happen. Put these back on again so I can see that. When I'm done with this little bits of detail that I'm doing here, if you can see it, there's these raised areas here. These little bumps. I'm just going to paint those a darker shade of metallic so that they're a little more obvious. And then I'll let this go. Dry, and I'll take a little bit of a break then. And maybe after break, I'll actually be able to talk while I'm painting. Talk more about stock cars. There were two NASCAR, which we think of as stock car racing now, but also USAC, United States Auto Club. USAC was the sanctioning body for open wheel racing before there was all sorts of politics and money and stuff involved. That was all sad. Everybody's trying to cash in and almost ruined open wheel racing. So most people think of NASCAR, as the stock car, but we were up north, and so we didn't have Richard Petty and Fireball Roberts and all of those other guys. We read about them, we hear about them, we knew they were racing, but we never got to see them because they were NASCAR, and that was in the South. We had USAC stock car racing. And most of the drivers were the same drivers as drove in the open wheel racing. They would just ride in these cars that were actually more or less stock. They were cars off the showroom with retuned engines, beefed up suspensions, and more importantly, a roll cage and a racing seat. Yeah, that led to that was some interesting racing at the time. So if I can remember what I was talking about when I come back and start talking, I'm going to talk about USAC stock car racing in the 1950s and 60s. But you can see now there's slightly darker paint on the raised bits, not the T's. That was the same metal as that, but there's that. This was important because I need to test fit this part and some of the other suspension parts before I tape this up and paint it. And I'm going to also talk about how I'm going to follow the instructions in terms of assembly, because I don't think it'll work, at least not very well. Okay, as I had mentioned several times now, I am going to take a break, which I usually don't do, but I'll try to keep it short, 15 minutes or so, unlike those long breaks I used to take when I went until 2. Here, you can look at and watch paint dry there. So I'll be back in a little while. Thanks for dropping in. I will see you again soon. It did come back. I hadn't used the brake button in months and months, so I wasn't, entirely sure what would happen. Okay. The outside of this needs to be painted British racing green without painting the inside, so I need to tape up all the openings and all the edges. All right, but before I do that, there's suspension parts. Let me just show you move this aside for a second. So there's this lower arms, and then the swivels that hold the tires and keep the brakes, and then they attach the upper arm. So this thing here, this is the upper arm, okay? And it goes across here, and then these moving parts, because the steering is actually supposed to work somehow or other, believe it or not. The steering is actually supposed to work. What they suggest doing, what they recommend doing on the instructions is that the lower arms are cemented into place and then the upper arm is put on. But what I found, I'll just take one out here. These are the lower arms. You can see that they're different sizes. I talked about the asymmetry of that before. This way. So the straight side to the front, okay, is that, just take this off of here. Is these, one of the things you need to fit is these pins go in these little holes. Okay, like this. And they don't because there's paint on them. Okay, so they need to be made smaller. But when they go in there, this thing flexes up and down. Okay, not a lot, just a little. So if I put these in and cement them in, first. Okay, they could be like it could just be wrong, and so what I'm thinking of doing is putting this in first. Of course, this doesn't. Yeah, this is why it says test the fit. I go here. It doesn't seem, I can't seem to get this to fit at all. Tabs on the bottom that look like they're supposed to fit into something or onto something. I guess like that. Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't really fit. Does it go way up in the front like that? Really, I'm sorry. I'm just baffled by this. I don't know really how this is supposed to fit. Think, think like that. But those don't. They're supposed to go inside of that. It's got these little alignment pins that look like they should align with something, but they just simply don't. Yeah, I mean, really, I'm kind of baffled by how this is supposed to go. So if I test fit that, one of these spindles, they're not symmetric. Okay, one goes on one side, one goes on the other. And then this is supposed to go. I'm really glad I'm test fitting this stuff because it just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. See, they turn like that. That's what it's supposed to do once those fit in there. But where does this go? In some ways, it looks like this is made. See, there's these little notches here. It looks like this is made to just fit like that. Sort of does on this side. Doesn't on this side. I think that's how it's supposed to go. Is those is supposed to fit in there like that. This side's just a little too big. Pretty certain that's the intent. So what I'm fiddling around, why I'm fiddling around with this is like I showed you that these little things here go into those little holes and they flex, right? And then this is supposed to sit down on top of them. Well, if this is put, this doesn't flex. If it's put in place the way I think it's supposed to be, okay, which is going to take a little bit of modification to make it set. This is going to sit solidly. I mean, as solid as you can, given the contact points, which are minuscule, tiny little cement contact points, not much at all. But yeah, that's how it's supposed to go in these little prongs. What I'm thinking of doing is doing it backward, which is to put this on first. Okay, put this on first, and then put the spindles in. Yeah, I know. There. Put the spindles in there, and then put the spindle on and then insert it. Okay, so none of these parts fit. It's not a terribly surprising thing. Just kind of start at one end and work to the other. This is supposed to go in here and rotate, but it doesn't, probably because of the amount of paint on it. And then the bottom goes in like this. But it doesn't. It's not very well. Oh, there. Not too, that's actually not too bad. So that goes in like that. Attaches here like that. And then the top goes on like that and it holds it in place. Let's see if this one will fit. little bit. This is the testing part. It's supposed to go in like that. And that side too, but it doesn't. Yes, I will keep at it until it does. I don't take too much off. I don't want to weaken it. Okay. There's not much of it. Okay, it goes in now, and it turns. Ticking. There we go. But there's just it's a little bit too big and a bulgy point here. I can see I'm gonna have to do tiny bits of touch-up paint when this is done because the chrome is showing through. I should have taken off all the chrome. I just want to make sure I can get it in and out. And that works better. Now it needs to go through the top. Like this. Close, but not quite. Just it's just down at the bottom here. It isn't a surprising thing given how it's been molded. Plating kind of puddles up under there. Okay, it's kind of wiggly, but not terrible. Same thing there. The steering is supposed to work on this. And given the tiny contact points for cementing these parts, I can't imagine it working without breaking. Just if this is actually going to work, it will look like that. And then it will be attached to the body of the car like that. Going to leave it down there. Okay, but this needs to be able to fit. And as far as I can tell, it is supposed to fit here like that. Tiny little points of contact. I don't want to, I'm going to make these a little smaller here because there just isn't much plastic there to work with. I mean, I could open it up a little on the back side, I guess. I don't know what those alignment pins are for. Like why bother? Probably repaint these after they're installed because the chrome is showing. Oh, I need to scrape the chrome off anyway. I'm going to have to use model cement on this in order to have any chance at all of it adhering. And the chrome plating gets in the way of that. So much little bitty futzing around with this to get it to work. Seriously. So it isn't just the aluminum paint I put on here, it's the chrome plating underneath that is going to keep the parts are just going to fall off. Well, the testing part of this is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. But it needs to be done. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I'll be scraping the paint off of that after it is painted green. Excuse me. Just too big, just slightly too big for what's attempting to do. It doesn't fit into the slot. The X-Acto knife would work better. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. I need to start taping this, though, sooner than later. Otherwise, I won't have time to get the tape on it before the end of the stream. Okay, that's fitting better. At least I can see how it's kind of supposed to go. If I can get that on there and get it to stick, it should be okay. I'm just going to try to keep these parts together like this so I can tell which goes where. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but these need to go into those holes here and here, but I'm not going to do that until this is painted because then there'll be even yet more paint on it. And these are parts of the steering mechanism. That's supposed to make it look like it steers, and then this goes on the bottom of this. You can almost do that now. It's not at all. It's just amazingly bad. I go like this. And it goes this way. Because it's supposed to, it angles down. I would have thought because it angled that you would put it like this, so that the angle was with the angle, not opposed to the angle. In fact, I think that's how it's supposed to go. The instructions are of practically no use. The fat end goes toward the back. And that's that way. Got it. The fat end meaning the bigger end. The steering column goes through that gap. I guess there's no real rush to do that today. It's more important to get the sanding done. I mean, not the sanding, the taping. Duh. What am I talking about? It's more important to tape the body so that I can paint it than it is anything else right now. Because unless I do that, I can't really do anything else. So the instrument panel can wait. The suspension parts can wait. And I need to get the tape. Excuse me. Yeah. So I'm going to tape the edges along here, right along the top. Okay. When I get to here, I'm going to tape the inside of it so that these edges will stay silver, but these will turn green. It's just going to be the way it is. And hopefully I won't get too much paint on the inside. Okay, well, that sticks way up over the edge. It's way too much. I should be able to talk while I'm taping. One would think one of you, somebody would think that. I would think that. You know, I'm becoming more and more incompetent as the days go by. Okay. So, the tape goes up to the edge here, and then that's going to be painted green. There's a piece that fits onto that. Hi, Aman. You got it. You got your PC. Congratulations. That was quite an ordeal waiting for that. So I'm really glad that you have it now. It's this piece of tape to fill in. I have to tell myself, at least with this, if I make a mistake or a mess or something, it's just tape. It's not too hard to fix. But I want to make sure it's pressed down pretty tightly on there, because I don't want, when I spray the paint, I don't want it all over parts where I don't want it. And then I'll get paint on those points, and that'll have to come off, so that, like, the parts that I was, test fitting, I'm just trimming these off because I don't want the tape. I don't want the tape to. Okay, well, it wasn't terribly good. I managed to mess up tape. I cut it too deeply, and I got a little piece dangling there. But fortunately, I'm just putting tape on. One of the hard drives was just not even working. So the very first thing you did was talk to your friend. Cool. You've got a game session today too, don't you? Or has that already happened? Okay, that's pretty cool. I guess that's good. But it was broken for so long that you hadn't really missed anything. This tape, I want this to go over the edge, but not too far. I don't want it to fold over. So it went a little too far. I guess I can reposition it. Yeah, this is amusingly. Yeah, that's good. Get the angle corner down there. Oh no. Okay. Okay. So you're going to have to reschedule. Okay. Well, that was a mistake. I can't. I have to. That part can't be taped yet. It was nicely. Oh, geez. Okay. Now it's all messed up. Okay. The problem is I couldn't tape that part yet because then I couldn't get down there, and I need to put tape on these openings down here to cover them up so that the paint doesn't come through. At least I'm trying to do that. There's all sorts of weird little angles and stuff there. And then I poked a hole in the tape. That doesn't help, does it? Nope. Woolly tape doesn't do it. Oh, I wanted the inside of this. Yeah, okay. I'm muttering to myself as I am failing to put tape on. Oh no, not another sad one. What happened to Arachne now? What? She seems to be like just one tragedy after the other. It's these little. The issue here is the mounting for the engine mounts, which are these little prongs. So the part I'm dealing with down here is going to be largely invisible because it's under the engine. But I'm spending a huge amount of time messing around with it because that's what I do. I spend lots of time messing around with things of no consequence. Because why not? I was gonna talk about stock car racing, and I ended up not talking about anything because I'm spending my time messing around with little bits of tape around little bits of places that I don't want painted green, but I can't get the tape to. I found a way to do this once. I can't remember what it was. I think I doubled up the tape, maybe. Maybe I doubled up the tape and then put it on that way. But the issue I've had is that the tape sticks to whatever I'm using to stick it on more than it sticks to the thing I'm sticking it to. That might work. Looks sealed up pretty well. I need to do this here. As I'm doing this, I'm starting to think about the painting of the stripe. Okay. It's starting to think about that because it's going to have to be done at some point. Good, I've made it too narrow. The painting of the stripe can go one of two ways. Okay. The one you would usually think of, the one you would think of doing is paint the body green, right? Paint the body of the car green and then paint the yellow stripe onto that. And that is, one way to do it. The other way to do it, and this seems a little counterintuitive, but actually would work, is to paint the body yellow and then to tape off where the stripe is and paint green around it. And in some ways, that's, when I read a book about model airplane painting, they suggested doing that. Like if you're painting D-Day stripes, the white stripes on a plane, is to paint it white first and then cover up where the stripes are going to be and then paint the darker color. One reason to do that would be that the reason I'm sorry, these little round bits are going to be a problem. One reason to do that would be that the yellow might not cover the green. Sometimes those paints are kind of translucent. So it might be that, in fact, the green covers the yellow a whole lot better than the yellow would cover the green, in which case it would make sense to paint things yellow, and then mask where the stripe is going to go. Okay. And then to mask where the stripe is going to go, and then paint the green over it. Thinking ahead to that, what I'm actually planning to do, I hope this will end up working. What I'm planning to do is test that. I'm actually planning to test painting one color over the other to see how that goes. So I'm going to paint some yellow and then paint green over it and paint some green and paint yellow over it, and end up testing to see which one works better. And here I'm thinking that if green gets on the aluminum on the inside, you can always kind of scrape that off a little bit, and then and repaint it. And we'll find out sometime in the future whether it's going to be green over yellow or yellow over green. We don't know which way it's going to go. That's why I want to test it. I'm not going to test it anytime soon because I actually do not have the yellow paint. I have flat yellow, which is the color that I need for the exhaust, but I don't have a glossy yellow, which is the color that I need for the stripe. And I have to get that at some point. I don't need it now because the bottom doesn't have a stripe. And you do not need to be concerned about the stripe on the bottom where there is none. I only need to be concerned about the stripe where it exists. So there's that. The intent was to not have the tape fold down over the edge like that. Not a real problem as long as stuff is covered. But the intent was to have the tape. Now the intent has changed. I'll just have to tape this over. And then at the end of this, what I'm going to do is, peel back the tape that got folded over where I don't want it folded over, is do one last check to make sure that I've covered up the parts I don't want green and I've left open the parts that I do want green. I have done that before. Believe it or not, I have in fact taped the wrong parts. Not a good thing. It really slows things down to have to totally redo it because the part you wanted painted is taped over and the part you didn't want painted is is not covered. Like I need to clean those scissors. It's going to be upside down like that as I'm painting it. I'll be painting like that. Okay. But I'm going to cover up the inside anyway, because you never know where the spray from spray is going to go. As long as it's covered. Kind of making a mash of it here. There. That's not covered. Getting careless. I'm getting careless. I'm just going to go over this one more time before I paint it. I will be pushing the tape down to make sure it's sealed, right? And also making sure that it's not overlapping and flopping over onto like I don't want that to fold over, because I want that to be painted green right on down to where the tape is. So I'll push that down and then, feel the edge. So this is I learned my lesson with the Savoia when I was painting the fuselage, right? And I had it on a piece of cardboard just to hold it, and I wanted to turn it over to get better light on it, and I realized way too late that it wasn't attached to the cardboard, and it fell on the floor, and I had to do some major surgery. Basically, I had to sand it all down and start over. It was not good. It was definitely a not good situation. I don't want that to happen again with this. So can't tell. Looks like there's some uncovered parts there. I'm going to stick another chunk of tape on the inside of this if I can get it there. Spray paint shouldn't get there, but you just can't count on it behaving at all ever. It should be safer. So this is going to be painted upside down because the bottom is the part that needs to be painted. And then this here is what I'm going to actually try to do is raise it up a little bit from the surface so it's not right on the surface. Otherwise, it's hard to get these sides accurately. Maybe I should try to do that now. Just show you kind of what I want to do. Ooh, leg fell asleep. That was not good. I want it up like that. So what I'm going to do is just take this painter's tape, the cheap tape, because it's going to be tape sticking to tape. Cheap in that in comparison to the modeling tape I'm using. I don't know if this will work. I suppose that's why I'm going to try it. Is I just want like a lot of this kind of loosely done. Stuck to the cardboard. It doesn't need to hold really strongly. It just needs to hold it and keeps it from blowing away when I spray paint on it. And to not fall off if I accidentally turn it a little bit. I just want that. Okay, just kind of like that. Yeah, that's it. So that's the taping part. I did the testing, and it was good that I did because parts didn't fit. I did the touch-up, and that was good. That worked fine. The touching up worked okay. I got that done, and I got the taping done. So that's ready to be painted green now, which I will do probably tomorrow. Not today. It's really humid today, so it's not a good painting day. Look at that. I'm putting some things away. I'm cleaning up a little bit. I'm doing workbench cleanup. That's pretty good. Got a half hour. Dare I paint the red? You know how things go the last part of the stream, right? How it's like, oh no, I have no coordination anyway. Dare I attempt to paint the red onto the instrument panel? There's a problem with the different once the red is painted, but it looks like the black paint is just, there's just a spot on the bottom of this, the one on the left. It only, I don't know, it comes and goes. No, I'm not going to do it. It's just too risky at this point to do that. I could, I'm going to set this aside because this has to be painted green. Right, spray paint. The spray painting event needs to occur. To set this aside. What I'm going to do then is during the last bit, there's two things I could do. One is I could cement this onto the upper arm. I'm kind of tempted to do that. I think I can do that. I need to clean off. Well, I'm going to have to sand off these little nibs because they do not help position the part. They just don't. So that's the right side. This is the back. I keep looking at this, trying to make sure that it goes on the right way, because it's not symmetric. It goes way back to the instructions up here. This is the right side, the long side. And then the higher side goes toward the back. So it goes like that. I just need to get the paint. And the chrome off of it so it sticks. This, I'm going to file those little nubbins off completely because they actually just get in the way. They don't help. They're supposed to help position the part, right? They're supposed to do that. And what they do is they keep it from going where it needs to go. So after I'm done mangling this piece, you can't see what I'm doing because my fingers are in the way. Now here, I'll just hold it this way. Once I'm done mangling this piece, I'll test fit it again and then cement it on and probably put a clothespin on it to hold it in place. Absolutely, positively keep checking this over and over. This is the right side. And that goes back. It angles with the angle. And it does. It fits. It slides around. Okay, but it fits much better than it did otherwise. And what I should do, let me check this, just to make sure that the opening works. Let me take a toothpick and just run it through there. All right, I'm going to do this. What can happen? What can possibly happen? All sorts of terrible things can happen. But I'm going to do my best to not have a horrible thing happen. Cement always kind of clogs up there. See, you can't see it, but the cement is supposed to be coming out of the little end of the tube, and it doesn't because it always just dries in the tube. And then this little wire goes in, opens it up, and there, little bits of cement come out. Touch one here. Here. It's way too much. Tap it up and make an effort to align the parts. As it does kind of grab. It's not quite as bad as CA. Okay, where it's once it's in place, it doesn't move. But it's also not quite like contact cement, where one has a couple of minutes actually to adjust parts. And the more I play with it, the more it wiggles. Yeah, I thought about clamping this with a clothespin, but it's not going to stay in place. It's just going to move. I'm just going to get it lined up, and then just hold it. The thing goes through it like this. Which it does without a problem. Okay, well, it's on there. I'm just trying to make sure it's aligned, so it's not like rotated or twisted or something. And since the parts don't fit absolutely perfectly anyway, looks like it's going to be as good as it gets. Or if it moved. No, that's it. I'm actually going to let it set like that. So if there's a little bit of weight on it, it's pushing down, on the part that's cemented there. I did an assembly. Yay. Okay. There's nothing showing here now. This is what I managed to accomplish in over 2 hours today. What I managed to accomplish was I did a little bit of touch up on the body, which is over there. I got it taped and ready to be primed. Well, not primed, but painted. I redid this, and now I need to do it. So, oh man, so ticked off at this chrome plating. I need to do some touch up. The chrome plating, the paint just doesn't adhere to it, and then get these shiny spots. And what I need to do, what I've learned is, I guess, with the rest of this, that I need to, it's not enough just to have primer on it. It's like the whole thing needs to be stripped off. Yeah, that was good. I managed to dump this whole thing over. This is out. So what's happened here, you can see it right there. See that shiny sparkly spot? Yeah. And that's where this paint isn't covering it. And then I managed to scrape up the edges here. Just over and over and over again. I need to emphasize how stupid it was for this model to be chrome plated and how difficult that has made painting this to look good. Okay, I think I've got that. I'm going to stick this in the box. Here, I'll show you. This is the parts box. Okay, the suspension parts that now have been fitted together, except for the prongs here that go into the body, which I'm not going to bother with until the body is painted, and then I'll get them to fit. And I'm going to, once the lower body is painted and it looks okay, which means that it looks good enough so that I don't feel like stripping off the paint and starting over. I'll assemble the front suspension and continue just working on this. The white parts need to be turned red, and then the insides of these dials should have little white markings on them. And then there's tiny little spots like that right there that needs to be repainted with the aluminum paint. For the most part, it's not too bad. See how it looks when the red is on and how much touching up needs to be done. I'm going to start wrapping up here. I'm going to talk about Dyson Dungeons, which is a group of friends and relatives who put on the most amazing Dungeons and Dragons show that you need to watch. And the best way to do that, I'll just say, is catch it on YouTube. You know, go to YouTube and find Dyson Dungeons and watch some of the previous episodes. I think you'll find them to be very entertaining. You know, either we're going to have a very funny moment like retail shopping or, you know, looking for the perfect pretzel or something like that. Or we'll have a very serious moment where we're in combat and my character, the furbog fighter, gets mostly killed. You know, our combats are pretty intense sometimes, but they're, and our DM is just an amazing voice actress. She just does amazing things. Okay. Yeah, you need to find the arsonist. I know that you found one of the criminals who get cement on here. And you found a dagger that gave you kind of a clue. But yeah, that's the next part of the quest. So you're going to play on Monday? That's good. Yeah, this is the process box. I also have a done box, and I have a box of parts that haven't been cleaned up yet. But watch our Dungeons and Dragons show. And this stream is a spin-off. It's kind of like what Mork and Mindy are. There's lots of spin-offs of all sorts of TV shows. I don't keep track of them anymore. Joni Loves Chachi. I think that was a spin-off of something. Frasier. That was a spin-off of Cheers, right? Yep, I got that right. I remembered that. Well, this is a spin-off of Dungeons and Dragons show, because we produce our own dungeon tiles and minifigs, and I paint them here. And when I don't have those, which is most of the time, I work on models that remind me of building models when I was a kid, like this one. Except this one, when I was a kid, I just put it together, as opposed to trying to paint it and make it look good. I'm going to show you what I'm dealing with, though. Yes, these parts are all chrome plated, heavy chrome plating, uneven, blisteringly, blindingly shiny for no reason at all, other than that they wanted the chrome plate stuff. Nothing on the real car was ever chrome plated. Just wasn't. No chrome plating on it at all. So this has become a challenge in dealing with this. Oh my, I didn't realize that. The velocity stacks, okay? I thought they were like a piece, but they're each individual pieces. And those are the spinners that hold on the wheels, the springs, which don't look like springs. I don't know what that is. I'll have to find out. This is the roll bar. This is the only protection the driver has from being demolished if there's an accident. There's fuel filler covers and oil filler covers. There's a wrench. Tiny little, whatever these are. I don't know what those are. Tiny little bits of chrome that probably go into the rear suspension somehow. This is, I think, is supposed to be the ignition, the transistorized ignition. None of the parts are numbered. A little bit unusual for a model. None of the parts are really numbered. They're supposed to guess which ones they are by their shape. There's an F and an R here. Front and rear, but those were just right and left suspension parts. This is actually hilarious. I keep showing this to people. Not only are all the parts chrome plated, okay, which makes it really hard to deal with, but this comes with a driver figure. Look at that. Shiny Metal Man. I think this is like a Terminator driver. I think I'm actually almost tempted to see if I can put it together and keep it shiny chromed, which is really hard to do because the sprues are attached to it and the chrome plating comes off when they're cut off. That I saw that and I just had to laugh. Like, I don't remember that happening when I built this as a kid, but it's really, really stupid. Let's see, Wednesday. Friday, what I'll be doing on Friday is hopefully unmasking the body and going, oh, that came out really well. That's what I'm hoping will happen, is that I'll unmask the body that was spray paint it and go, that looks really pretty good. And then paint the instrument panel. And maybe actually, if things are going okay, I can assemble these parts, these bits for the front suspension, and then move on to the next parts of the model. If they don't go well, then I'll have to, in some ways, just start over with some of these things. Ooh, when I was test fitting, okay, I suddenly remembered that the wheels are supposed to fit on here. And once these are put onto the model, and I need to sand these down somehow, I won't be able to. I just won't be able to because of the way this is put together. So I need to test these. I need to test those with the wheels. Try to remind me to do that. Otherwise, that will be a real challenge later on. Okay, well, say goodbye to the parts in process. Goodbye, parts in process. See you on Friday. Say goodbye to the taped up, ready for being spray painted lower body of the model. See you Friday. Hopefully green. Hopefully looking really nice. Hopefully. And then I will be back on Friday, bringing those parts back, diving into this box again, test fitting some things again, finishing the control panel, the instrument panel, not control panel, the instrument panel, and then moving on to what's next. Let's look. The parts I'm going to be working on are these here. The lower body continued and the tie rod and the steering wheel, which all comes together so that the front wheels turn. And what I'll be doing then is I'll be moving on to the rear suspension, okay, which is a whole bunch of tiny little parts that are chrome plated that need to be dechromed and primed so that they can be painted aluminum. And then to the upper body, and I'm not going to be putting the caps in yet, but this has to be painted. And as I'm getting to this point, these two parts need to come together, and that seam needs to be filled and sanded so it disappears. Just does. And then I'll be, at some point then, looking really seriously at testing to see whether I should paint the yellow stripe onto the green already painted body, or whether I should paint it yellow and then mask it off and then paint green. And that will depend 100% on whether the green covers the yellow or the yellow covers the green, because sometimes they don't cover that well. And what I might do is the stripe goes around the back of this tail piece here, okay, is before I paint the upper body, okay, I'm going to test, after I test the coverage of which covers better, is I'm going to paint the stripe on this. Because that's going to be a lot easier than painting the stripe on the front of this, because the stripe on the front of this flares out at the front. Yeah, I'm a little apprehensive about how to do that, but I don't want to use the decal. The decal just, it isn't right, and it looks crooked. Just like the Savoia, when I painted the stripes on the Savoia instead of using the decal. Oh, the thing that looked like the wrench is the tailpipe support. Oh, and the thing I wasn't sure of what it was is a Nerf bar. I had no idea why that's called a Nerf bar. It's like a rear bumper, which is kind of a weird thing. Oh, and I can work on the seat. I can paint the seat. That would be a fun thing to do. It's all going to be kind of out of order as I get through the parts and get them prepared and get them ready for assembly. But hopefully next week, hopefully Friday, I'll be able to actually start getting to this bit here. Okay, this stuff here, and have the lower body, at least the front end of the lower body, pretty much completed. Okay, well, I need to wrap up. Things are coming along. As you can see, I made tiny, infinitesimal little bits of visible progress today, but some. I'll be back on Friday, and sometimes, that might be a day where it just looks like, oh, things actually happened. Or not. We'll find out. Thanks for joining in. I'll see you on Friday at more or less 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time while I continue to make tiny little bits of progress on the Lotus-Ford. See you then.